Hello artists. So some of you have already finished your grisaille, and so it is time to show you, if you've finished your grisaille and it's perfectly dry, what you do to glaze it. All right, I'm going to put some glaze in the center of my palette. And now your glazing medium, it looks almost like white paint. And here's another. And I want you to see the differences. So this is gloss medium, and then this is also medium. And what both of these are going to do is they're going to make my paint transparent. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So remember, before you start to paint, to put on your invisible glove, remember I'm wearing regular gloves because I have to wear splints on my wrists because I damaged them putting everything online. All right, so let's look at the difference. So here's red paint, and you can see that it's very opaque. But now if I mix it, even though this glazing medium looks like it's white, if I mix it with my glazing medium, do you see what just happened? Let me grab a little bit more. What I've done is I've turned it into a transparent layer. And then if I use the other glazing medium, so that's that milky one, and then this one's a little bit clearer. But again, I'm going to take my paint, which you can see is very opaque, and I add glazing medium, and again, it becomes very transparent. And so even though this presents as white, and this presents as a milky clear thing, when they dry, they will dry completely transparent, and you will just see a light film of that red suspended in a clear. So I'm going to do that with a couple of other colors just so you can see how this works. So I'm going to grab a blue, and again you can see the blue is opaque. But now if I take that blue and I mix it with a glazing medium, you can see that it has become transparent. Now some colors are already fairly transparent, fairly translucent. One of those is my magenta. Now if I take magenta straight up and I put it on my paper, I can see through the magenta, through that primary red a little bit. Certainly more than with the red here, with the cadmium, which is a much more opaque pigment, and then the cerulean is a much more opaque than my magenta or primary. And so I can take my magenta and primary, now I add some glazing medium, and it is really transparent. And so this is something you can do in your sketchbook if you want to, is you can try out and see what each of your colors looks like when you create a transparent glaze of it. And then something that you can do as they start to dry, that one's still quite wet. That's still quite wet. This is drier, so you can see what happens when I glaze my transparent color over another color. It shifts it. So this becomes green, but it isn't like the same as a mixed green. It is transparent. So let's see how that works on a grisaille. So I'm just going to choose some random colors because I just painted this as a sample. I don't really have an actual picture. So let's assume that instead of a regular ball, I'm playing pool, and so I want this to be green. I can try and create, I don't know, aren't pool tables green? I thought they might be green. So I'm just gonna take, I need a little bit more. I need my paint to be super duper transparent, because the idea is for me to not have to repaint this, but to just colorize it. So if my color comes on too opaque, I'm gonna grab my rag and wipe it off if it's too opaque. So if you've gotten a painting that you really love and you're like, oh man, I am afraid of glazing this, because I really love what I did in my grisaille, well, put some color on it. If you don't like it, wipe it off. It's not the end of the world. So now I'm just gonna wet this area, make my paint move easier and faster. And I'm gonna grab my glazing medium, mix it in with my green, and apply a nice transparent layer of that green. And so I'm going to let the grays from underneath make it darker, the black from underneath make it darker. I don't need to mix a dark green. I don't need to mix a light green. I don't need to put black into this color. I don't need to put white into this color. If I did my grisaille correctly, it is already there. And now, one thing I need to tell you about glazes is that it takes many layers to get it to be the rich color that you want. It is far better to put multiple layers than it is to try to get it to be the color you want in one layer, because in order for you to get it as brilliant as you were hoping to get it in that one layer, you're going to have to go opaque. And then what's the point of that? We're wanting to work transparent. So what happens when you work transparent is that each layer of glaze that sits on that surface captures light. You know, I mean, I know that light travels very quickly, 186,000 miles. Is it a second or a minute? A second. But for that fraction of a second, it's holding on. It's holding on to my color and to my light, and it makes it brilliant. So let's see, how about we put a blue in that background? And I'm gonna take some glaze and I'm gonna add blue here. And remember, I can blend my colors really easily if I don't want to have those brush strokes visible, because you're going to be like, oh, I can see my brush strokes. Okay, get rid of them if you don't want to see your brush strokes. So I've come in with some yellow, and you can really now start to see the advantage of having done this. Remember what happened when I mix yellow with black or with gray, it turns green, but if I layer that glaze, it still looks like a yellow ball. Because why? Even though optically it starts to look greenish, but the yellow is sitting on top. And so my brain tells me, oh, it's a yellow ball sitting on a green ground. So now we were talking about reflected light. So I have all these greens coming up, and I'm going to put some green in my reflected light here, because I know that green is bouncing off from the tabletop to my yellow ball. And I'm going to do the same thing with blue here in the shadow. It's still going to be my yellow ball, but I want just a little bit of blue showing in that shadow area. so that it feels like it's a part of this room and not starting to turn a little green because the yellow underneath wasn't fully dry. And now say, once this dries, I can add another layer of green, I can add another layer of yellow, I can add another layer of blue, because I decided that I want the yellow to be a little bit more orange. So I've added white, and what I've made, just so you can see the color, I have made a transparent. You can see that's transparent. You can see it's transparent because you can see the color shining through. I have made a transparent layer. And so, again, the one underneath isn't fully dry, but look at what's happening here. The white, even though it was transparent, the white from that mixture begins to obliterate the darks I had there. So you want to make sure, so you can glaze a light over a dark. When you do, the surface becomes opalescent. When you layer a color over a light, which is what we've done here, you get translucency. So that's two of the different kinds of surfaces you can play with as you go and glaze your grisaille. And so remember, the idea here is not that you're going to repaint your image. You don't want to have to be adding black. You don't want to have to be adding white. Those colors should have been there from your underpainting, your grisaille. You shouldn't have to be adding. The very last thing you add, if you need a white highlight, because white has gotten glazed over, you can add little sparkles of white to shapes where you need to have a pure white. But other than that, you want to try. Now that doesn't mean that, oh, I really wanted this to be a much darker color back here and I didn't have it in the grisaille. Sure, go ahead and glaze that on there, but don't start glazing. So there you have it, artists. So this is now with 2 layers of glaze on it. And I would want to keep waiting, because remember the mess I made here by layering before it was fully dry. I want to keep waiting for this layer to dry, and then I can keep adding color where I want to and need to. But you can see now these are not the most attractive colors I've chosen to paint this. But we now have an idea. If you were working from color photograph, you can, make your painting look more like the photograph by using what we refer to as local color, the actual color of your painting or of the source image. But you can also use colors from Peloton.com. So if you choose analogous colors, like this could have been a painting made out of analogous colors, or it could have been, I chose to go with analogous background and foreground, and then the yellow as a contrast of cold colors to warm colors. But you can do whatever colors you want, whether real colors or imagined. So yeah, that's how you finish your painting. And then you can make it more and more rich in color by adding more and more layers, waiting for each layer to dry.